Welcome to Universal Truths, Exploring the Extraordinary, the space where healing meets mystery and the human experience unfolds in all its depth. Here, we explore the challenges that shape us, the emotions that move us, and the encounters that remind us that there's more to this world than what we see. From personal growth and inner transformation to the paranormal and the unexplained, every episode invites you to look deeper, think broader, and discover new perspectives. This is Universal Truths, Exploring the Extraordinary. Welcome to Universal Truths, Exploring the Extraordinary. Today's episode is titled Exploring the Paranormal. In this episode, I want to explore beyond the idea that the paranormal is only about ghosts. From unseen entities and lingering energies to mysterious beings and cryptids whispered about for generations, this episode explores the many forms the unknown can take. Not every investigation leads to a spirit, and not everything watching us wants to be understood or discovered. So with that said, I want to start with Spiritism and the foundation of paranormal thought. Before we move into modern paranormal classifications, it's important to acknowledge one of the most influential spiritual movements to shape how we understand spirit communication today is through Spiritism. Spiritism emerged in the mid-19th century, primarily through the work of Allan Kardec, a French educator and researcher. Rather than approaching spirit phenomena through the blind belief, Kardec applied a methodical investigative mindset. He gathered thousands of reports of spirit communication, automatic writing, trance speaking, and physical phenomena, and looked for consistent patterns rather than isolated stories. Kardec proposed that spirits are the souls of deceased humans at varying stages of moral and intellectual development. According to Spiritist philosophy, spirits continue to evolve after death, learning through experience and, in some cases, reincarnation. Communication with spirits was not viewed as supernatural spectacle, but as a natural process governed by universal laws not yet understood by science. What made Spiritism unique and controversial was its emphasis on discernment, ethics, and responsibility. Kardec warned against fear-based interpretations, manipulation, and blind acceptance. He emphasized not all spirits possess wisdom or truth, and that human intention, emotional state, and mental health matter deeply when engaging with the unseen. Many modern paranormal concepts, such as levels of spirit consciousness, earthbound spirits, and non-malicious explanations for hauntings, trace their roots directly back to Spiritist philosophy. Kardec frequently emphasized discernment in spirit communication, paraphrased in his teachings as the idea that spirits should be judged by the quality of their messages, not by their claims or appearances. In other words, wisdom, consistency, and ethical tone matter more than spectacle. Understanding this foundation helps us approach the paranormal not as chaos or danger, but as an organized, layered system of consciousness, one that requires responsibility, grounding, and critical thinking. So let's begin exploring the extraordinary. Why do humans, separated by centuries and continents, describe such similar phenomena? Well, throughout history, people have experienced things they couldn't easily explain. Strange sounds, visions, feelings of a presence, prophetic dreams, unexplained healings, or moments that felt beyond ordinary reality. What we now call paranormal simply means outside what we can currently explain with science. But the experiences themselves are not new at all. In ancient civilizations like ancient Egypt and ancient Mesopotamia, unusual events were often understood as messages from gods, spirits, or ancestors. Dreams were recorded carefully, omens were studied, temples even had designated interpreters for signs and visions. What we might label today as supernatural was once considered part of everyday life. In ancient Greece and ancient Rome, people visited oracles for guidance, believing divine forces communicated through certain individuals. During the medieval period in Europe, unexplained phenomena were often framed through religious beliefs, sometimes seen as miracles, other times as demonic influences. The interpretation depended largely on the culture, the time period, or who held authority. As science developed during the Enlightenment, many of these experiences began to be studied differently. Instead of assuming spirits or divine causes, scholars started looking at psychology, biology, and environmental explanations. By the 1800s, organized groups like the Society for Psychical Research were formed to scientifically investigate reports of ghosts, telepathy, and other unusual phenomena. Even then, the experiences themselves never disappeared, only the language around them shifted. Today, what is classified as paranormal includes things like ghost sightings, near-death experiences, psychic impressions, unexplained lights in the sky, or strong intuitive knowing. Some researchers explore neurological explanations, others study environmental factors, and many people still interpret these experiences spiritually. What's important to understand is this. Human experience of the unexplained has been consistent across thousands of years. The labels change, the explanations change, but the experiences remain. Rather than immediately dismissing or blindly accepting them, we can approach these stories with curiosity. History shows us that what one generation calls impossible, another may eventually understand differently. And sometimes there are things we simply don't have the tools to measure yet. Now let's step back into the late 1800s, when lawyers, doctors, writers, even respected scientists were attending seances, a time when talking to the dead was a serious topic of conversation. For the Society of Psychical Research, or SPR, was born, their mission not to mock and not to blindly believe, but to investigate. The SPR was founded in 1882 in the United Kingdom during a time when spiritualism was extremely popular. In the late 1800s, seances, table turning, spirit photography, and mediumship demonstrations were drawing huge crowds in both Europe and America. People from all walks of life, including scientists, writers, and doctors, were trying to figure out whether these experiences were genuine or clever tricks. The SPR became the first organized group to seriously and formally investigate claims of ghosts, telepathy, apparitions, and communication with the dead. They described themselves as the first society to conduct structured research into experiences that seemed to challenge modern science. Importantly, the organization itself did not take an official stance saying, "This is all real" or "This is all fake." Its members held a range of personal beliefs. Some were open-minded, some were believers, and some were skeptical. A big part of their early work involved investigating seances. During the late 19th century, many mediums claimed to produce physical manifestations, floating objects, spirit voices, mysterious photographs. The SPR approached this like detectives and went undercover to examine these claims carefully. In many cases, they exposed fraud. Hidden wires, secret compartments, fake spirit hands. Some mediums were using stage magic techniques. One well-known example was William Hope, a spirit photographer whose images were eventually shown to be manipulated. These investigations created tension. Some spiritualists felt betrayed, believing the SPR was attacking their faith. This tension reached a dramatic point involving Arthur Conan Doyle, the author of Sherlock Holmes, and a committed spiritualist. After repeated exposures of fraudulent mediums, Doyle believed the SPR had become too skeptical and dismissive of spiritual experiences. In protest, he led a mass resignation of dozens of members who felt the society was unfairly hostile toward spiritualism. By the early 1900s, many outspoken spiritualists had left the SPR because they felt its standards of proof were too strict. Later, investigator Nandor Fedor also criticized the SPR, arguing that it showed a bias against physical manifestations of spiritual phenomena. On the other hand, skeptics accused SPR members of being too emotionally invested in proving psychic abilities were real, so both sides claimed the other had bias. So historically, the SPR sits at an interesting crossroads. It was born in a time when belief in spirits was widespread, but it tried to apply structured investigation to those claims. It exposed fraud, disappointed believers, frustrated skeptics, and sparked ongoing debates that still exist today. In simple terms, the SPR represents one of the first serious attempts to bring scientific thinking into a world of seances and spirit claims. And from the beginning, it showed how difficult it can be to study experiences that sit right at the edge of belief and proof. When someone reports a ghost sighting, a psychic moment, or an unexplained experience, we still stand in the same space the SPR stood back in 1882, asking, is this real? Is this misunderstood? Is this fraud? Or is it something we simply don't fully understand yet? History shows us this isn't a new conversation. It's one that's been around, that we've been having for over a century, and really for thousands of years before that, to be honest. If you want to learn more about SPR, you can go to www.spr.ac.uk. The SPR absolutely influenced other groups. Once the idea took hold that paranormal claims could be investigated instead of just believed or dismissed, similar organizations began forming in other countries. For example, we have the American Society of Psychical Research, the ASPR. It was founded in 1885, just a few years after SPR. This was essentially the American counterpart. It was originally connected to the British SPR, but later became independent. The ASPR investigated mediumship, apparitions, telepathy, and haunted locations. Like the SPR, it included both skeptics and believers. And just like in the UK, tensions developed between those who wanted strict scientific controls and those who were more spiritually inclined. One notable early member was philosopher and psychologist William James, who was deeply interested in studying unusual human experiences without automatically dismissing them. The next was Ghost Club. Although originally founded in the 1800s and recognized later, the Ghost Club became one of the oldest organizations devoted to investigating hauntings. Unlike purely spiritualist groups, it aimed to examine cases critically, visiting reportedly haunted houses and interviewing witnesses. It blended curiosity with investigation, though not always with strict scientific controls. You have the Parapsychological Association. By the mid-20th century, research began shifting into universities. The Parapsychological Association was founded in 1957 to support more formal academic study of extrasensory perception, also known as ESP. Then you have psychokinesis and related phenomena. This marked a transition from seance rooms to laboratory experiments using statistics, controlled testing, and research design. When people talk about ghost stories, what they've often describing are deeply emotional and personal accounts. Spirits or ghosts are generally described as a form of consciousness, believed to remain after physical death. These entities are often considered earthbound, meaning they may be connected to specific locations, people, or emotional events. Many traditions suggest spirits linger due to unresolved experiences, sudden transitions, or strong emotional attachment. Investigators often note patterns, reported sounds, visual anomalies, or sensations that occur under similar conditions. From a modern research perspective, environmental psychology and neuroscience suggest that certain conditions such as electromagnetic fluctuations, infrasound, heightened emotional states, environmental factors, and memory recall can influence perception. Rather than dismissing spiritual encounters, this research highlights how sensitive the human nervous system may be to subtle changes in our surroundings. But what makes spirit encounters compelling is that many involved shared experiences, multiple witnesses reporting the same event. This raises the possibility that these encounters may exist at the intersection of memory, environment, and consciousness itself. We are still connected, tethered to our true home, even while we live in this physical world. At our core, we are energy. And if that is true, why is it so difficult to believe that we can occasionally experience the realm from which we came? Why is it hard to imagine that other forms of energy, beings, consciousness, or spiritual presence could interact with us, when their essence is not so different from our own? If we are energy, having a human experience, then moments of intuition, spiritual encounters, or paranormal experiences may not be interruptions of reality, but glimpses beyond the veil. Perhaps they are reminders that we are more than physical body. Perhaps they are echoes of home. Belief in spirits of the dead goes back thousands of years. Long before the word paranormal existed, people across ancient civilizations believed that something of us survived after death. In ancient Mesopotamia, some of the earliest written records describe spirits of the dead lingering if burial rituals weren't properly performed. People believed restless spirits could cause illness or misfortune, and the solution wasn't fear, it was ritual, proper offerings, and proper remembrance. In ancient Egypt, the soul was thought to have multiple parts. If the body wasn't preserved correctly, or if rituals weren't completed, the spirit might struggle in the afterlife. That's part of why mummification was so important. It wasn't superstition, it was spiritual technology to them. In ancient Greece, spirits of the dead were believed to dwell in the underworld, but they could appear to the living, especially if justice hadn't been served. One of the earliest recorded ghost stories appears in the writings of Pliny the Young, around the 1st century AD. He described a haunted house in Athens where a chained apparition was seen at night. Eventually, bones were discovered and properly buried, and the haunting stopped. Even then, the explanation was unresolved death. In ancient Rome, household spirits, called lairs, were believed to protect families. As we move into medieval Europe, ghost beliefs became more connected to religious teachings. Apparitions were sometimes thought to be souls in purgatory seeking prayers. Other times, unexplained encounters were interpreted as demonic deception. The meaning depended heavily on the religious worldview of the time. If we fast forward to the 1800s, the era of spiritualism, ghosts shifted from being silent apparitions to communicative spirits. Seances became popular, mediums claimed to relay messages from the dead, and organizations like the Society of Psychical Research attempted to investigate these claims more formally. And then something changed again. In the 20th century, psychology and neuroscience entered the conversation. Instead of asking, "Is this a spirit?" researchers began asking, "Could grief shape perception? Could sleep paralysis create shadow figures? Could carbon monoxide leaks cause hallucinations? Could infrasound create feelings of dread?" The explanation shifted from spiritual causes to environmental or neurological ones. Today, ghost experiences are generally described in a few categories. Apparitions, which are seeing someone who isn't physically there. Poltergeist activity, which is movements of objects. Crisis apparitions, seeing someone at the time of their death. Residual hauntings, repeated phenomena that seem like recordings. But here's what's fascinating. The experiences themselves haven't changed much over thousands of years. People still report seeing figures, hearing footsteps, feeling watched, dreaming of loved ones who have passed. What has changed is the interpretation. Ancient culture saw spirits as part of the natural order. Medieval societies filtered them through religion. The 1800s framed them as communicative souls, and today modern science often looks to the brain chemistry, psychology, and environment. The human experience remains consistent. The explanation evolves, and that raises an interesting question for us today. Are we witnessing spirits? Are we witnessing the mind under stress? Are we witnessing environmental factors we just now are learning about? Or are we still somewhere in between, standing in the same mystery our ancestors stood in thousands of years ago? So if spirits and ghosts were one part of the ancient mystery, they weren't the only part. Across cultures and centuries, people have reported encounters that go beyond a simple ghost sighting. Stories of doubles, shadow figures, nighttime attacks, moving objects, and entities that seem to attach themselves to a person. So let's start with the idea of a double, what we now call a doppelganger. In European folklore, a doppelganger was thought to be a living person's spirit double, often seen as an omen of illness or death. Seeing your own doppelganger was considered a warning. In some traditions, it wasn't a ghost of the dead, it was you, separated somehow from your physical body. Unlike ghosts, doppelgangers are typically alive, yet manifest as spectral reflections, sometimes casting no shadow or reflection. Their behavior may include following or shadowing a person, enacting future actions, or appearing to loved ones to create confusion. So I have a story I'm going to read to you that was submitted by a friend of mine. They had an experience with a doppelganger. She says, "When I was around 13 years old, I witnessed what I know now to be a doppelganger. It was a truly disturbing experience at the time, but I understand it now. The way my bed was laid out in my bedroom, you could see the doorway and into the hall. One night I was watching television, and I looked into the doorway and saw my younger sister, who was around 7 at the time, on all fours. She was not all the way into the doorway, so I could only see her head and shoulders and part of her torso. I asked her what she was doing out of bed, and she turned her head slowly, not saying a word, but just staring at me. My sister has beautiful blue eyes, but the eyes looking at me were dark and lifeless. It was like I was looking into a void. I jumped out of bed and ran toward the door, and when I got there, she was gone. So I walked to her room, and she was in bed sound asleep. There's no way she could have gotten to her room, climbed into bed, and covered up without me seeing her or hearing her. At the time, I had no idea what had happened. I knew it wasn't my imagination, and I knew it looked just like my sister, but wasn't my sister. I found out decades later about the term doppelganger. Part of folklore suggests if someone else sees your doppelganger, it may indicate you are unwell or will become sick. Well, shortly after that, she started experiencing seizures, where she would go into and out of almost a trance-like state, and her eyes would have the same dark, lifeless look to them. I feel now that it was warning me about what was to come. Oddly enough, the folklore began in Germany, and I had just happened to be living in Germany when this experience happened. Today, psychology offers possible explanations. Neurological conditions, extreme stress, or disruptions in how the brain processes self-image can cause experiences where someone perceives a double. But centuries ago, without brain science, it was interpreted as a spiritual or supernatural event. And then we have mimics. These are entities said to imitate the voice or appearance of someone familiar. Variations of this belief appear in multiple cultures. In older times, these were often described as deceptive spirits meant to lure or confuse. Unlike doppelgangers, which are generally passive observers, mimics actively interact with the living. They are frequently described as having distorted or eyeless faces when seen in light or exhibiting slightly unnatural speech patterns. Mimics often imitate voices from another room or of an absent person, creating fear and uncertainty. I have had an experience twice now with a mimic where we got what sounded like my husband saying something directed at me. The first time was the Haunted Chicken House in Heflin, Alabama, and the other was just here recently at the Garrett Coliseum in Montgomery. Now, modern researchers sometimes look at misidentification, auditory hallucinations, memory blending, or even environmental acoustics as possible explanations. Again, the experience hasn't changed, the lenses have. So the experience that we had at the Haunted Chicken House, we were asking questions, and that one I think said, "Okay, Jennifer." The one at the Garrett Coliseum last month just said Jennifer. And both times it was my husband's voice. It sounded just like him. I've played it for friends that know him, and they confirmed that that was his voice. It was a little creepy, but pretty cool to get some really cool evidence to have. If you go to Echo Advisor Truth Initiative, whether on YouTube or Facebook, both of those experiences should be on there for you to be able to listen to. Now, modern researchers sometimes look at misidentification, auditory hallucinations, memory blending, or even environmental acoustics as possible explanations. Poltergeist activity is another long-standing phenomenon. The word itself is German for noisy spirit, and it reports of objects moving, knocking sounds, and disturbances go back hundreds of years. In earlier times, these events were often blamed on mischievous spirits or demonic forces. By the 20th century, some researchers began noticing that many reported poltergeist cases centered around adolescents under emotional stress. This led to psychological theories about unconscious energy release or environmental factors. Whether one accepts those explanations or not, the focus shifted from external spirits to internal human factors. Some researchers have proposed that certain poltergeist phenomena may be associated with not just adolescents, but on many occasions adults who are experiencing intense emotional distress, trauma, or unresolved grief. The theory suggests that when overwhelming emotions are suppressed and not processed in a healthy way, the internal tension may manifest outwardly in an unusual environmental disturbance or its own energetic entity. Rather than viewing the activity as an external spirit, the perspective interprets it as a form of unconscious expression, an outward projection of unresolved emotional energy. In this model, the disturbances are not seen as an attacking entity, but as a reflection of psychological strain that requires acknowledgement, support, and healing. This interpretation shifts the focus from external forces to the emotional well-being of the individual involved, emphasizing the importance of addressing trauma and providing safe avenues for emotional processing. So now let's talk about something even older, which are nighttime visitations. In medieval Europe, people described attacks by incubi and succubi, male and female entities believed to visit during sleep, often associated with pressure on the chest and an inability to move. In paranormal tradition, an incubus, which is male associated, and a succubus, which is female associated, are portrayed as unseen beings said to engage with people during sleep, frequently connected to themes of intimacy and longing. Older accounts describe the incubus approaching women and the succubus approaching men, sometimes portrayed as seductive, manipulative, or draining one's life force. Such encounters were commonly interpreted as spiritual or ethical warnings rather than purely physical violations. Stories of these figures trace back to ancient Mesopotamia, extend through ancient Greece, and continue into medieval Europe, where they were associated with temptation, moral struggle, and the perceived dangers of unchecked desire. In many communities, these narratives provided explanations for nocturnal emissions, nighttime paralysis, and vivid dreams or emotional turmoil. Folklore frequently describes these beings as appearing attractive or familiar, interacting through immersive dream states, and drawing strength from fear, tension, or erotic charge. Contemporary psychological understanding, however, often interprets such episodes as manifestations of sleep paralysis, hypnagogic hallucinations, or expressions of internal conflict related to intimacy or anxiety, offering natural explanations for experiences once attributed exclusively to supernatural forces. Historically, protective responses centered around ritual cleansings, reciting devotionals, talismans, symbolic boundaries, and communal spiritual counsel. In present-day context, recommended responses focus more on improving rest patterns, managing stress, addressing unresolved trauma, and strengthening personal grounding techniques. Across time and culture, accounts of incubi and succubi reveal how societies have attempted to understand the meeting point between vulnerability, desire, and the unseen. In Newfoundland folklore, a similar figure became known as the Old Hag. The Old Hag is a name people used in different cultures to describe a scary experience that happens during sleep. In Old Norse stories, it was called the Mara. Later, people in places like the Caribbean, Newfoundland, and the Appalachia told similar stories. They described waking up and feeling like something heavy was sitting on their chest. They couldn't move, couldn't speak, and felt terrified, like someone or something was in the room. So today science has the name for this. It's called sleep paralysis. It happens when your brain wakes up before your body does. You might feel stuck, see or hear things that aren't really there, or a sense of presence. Even though it feels very real, it's your brain mixing dream activity with being awake. That's what science says. There have been many people out there who have witnessed this, who've gone through this, that have woken up with marks on their body, bruises on their body. So I don't know if science can really explain that part of it, even though that they're going through this sleep paralysis. They're also receiving physical marks. They're being physically attacked. So some of it can be explained, I'm sure, through science. And then some really is just the unknown. In the past, people didn't know about brain science, so they explained it as a spirit attack or some kind of negative force. Many believed it happened more when people were stressed, grieving, sick, or emotionally overwhelmed. Some traditions even said these beings fed on fear or exhaustion. Many witnesses have actually reported seeing somebody on their chest, an old woman. I'm not exactly sure how that can be explained away unless, again, science says it's just a lot of stress. There's a lot more out there in the paranormal world that science still can't explain. So instead of fighting the spirit, most old traditions focused on protection. People were told to rest more, pray or meditate, use protective symbols, set personal boundaries, and stay connected to supportive community members. Modern advice is actually pretty similar, just explained differently. Doctors and therapists recommend improving sleep habits, lowering stress, working through your trauma, and sometimes getting medical help if it happens often. So whether someone sees it as a spirit or it's neurological, the experience itself has stayed the same across time. Waking up scared, unable to move, feeling like something is there. What's changed is how we explain it, and that shows something important. When humans don't understand something frightening, we create stories to try to make sense of it and feel more in control. For centuries, these were considered literal demonic encounters. The experience is real and often terrifying, but we now understand the neurological process behind it. Ancient interpretation had it as demonic visitation. Modern interpretation has it as the brain and body misfire during REM sleep. Then there's the idea of paranormal parasites or hitchhikers, entities believed to attach themselves to a person after visiting a haunted location. In ancient times, this might have been described as a spirit attachment or possession. Ritual cleansing practices were common across many cultures to remove unwanted spiritual influence. Today, some mental health professionals might look at trauma responses, suggestions, anxiety, or heightened sensitivity after a frightening experience. Others in spiritual communities still view attachment as a literal energetic phenomenon. They are believed to attach to individuals to feed on psychic energy, emotions, or your life force. Much like biological parasites, they typically aim to weaken rather than immediately harm their host. They are thought to draw energy from intense emotions such as fear, anger, guilt, or desire, sometimes influencing behavior by increasing self-destructiveness, depression, or aggression. These entities are often described as invisible attachments, shadowy figures, or incubus and succubus type presences, appearing during sleep or moments of vulnerability. Historical and contemporary accounts suggest they may be also attached during near-death experiences, when the individual's consciousness is extremely sensitive or in a transitional state. In such cases, the experiences are said to leave lingering energetic effects that require healing, grounding, or emotional processing to restore balance. What's important here isn't choosing a side, it's recognizing a pattern. So throughout history, human beings have consistently reported feeling watched, seeing doubles, experiencing nighttime paralysis with presence, objects moving unexpectedly, and feeling something attach them after intense events. Ancient societies explain these through spirits, demons, or unseen forces. Medieval times filtered them through religious doctrine. The 1800s tried to test them through seance rooms and investigation societies, like we spoke about earlier. In modern era, we look at it through a neurological, psychological, and environmental science. The experiences persist and the interpretations evolve. And perhaps the real story isn't just about whether these phenomena are spiritual or psychological, but about how humanity has always tried to make sense of the unexplained, using the knowledge available at the time. What we once called demons, we may now call sleep disorders. What we once called spirit doubles, doppelgangers, we now call neurological events. What we once called possession, science may now call trauma or disassociation. Or depending on one's belief system, perhaps the explanation is more layered than that. History shows us one clear thing. The unknown has always walked beside us, and how we define it says as much about our error as it does about the experience itself. Next, I want to dive into some other unexplained mysteries that have fascinated paranormal communities, from strange sightings to the elusive creatures we call cryptids. Cryptids are creatures that exist in the gray area between myth, folklore, and science. They are usually described as biological or semi-biological beings whose existence is suggested mostly through eyewitness accounts, stories, or cultural memory, rather than confirmed scientific proof. In short, cryptids are mysterious creatures people have reported seeing, but science hasn't officially verified, at least not yet. Humans have been fascinated by unusual creatures for thousands of years. Ancient cultures recorded strange beasts in art, carvings, and writings. In Egypt, temple reliefs show hybrids that were part crocodile, lion, and hippo, often acting as spiritual guardians. Mesoamerica, the Aztecs and Mayans drew feathered serpents and other hybrid creatures that might reflect memories of unusual animals or symbolic spirits. Mesopotamian art depicts a lion-headed eagle and fish-human hybrids seen as semi-divine protectors. Medieval European manuscripts feature monstrous wolves, giant birds, and water serpents often labeled as marvels and wonders of creation. While scholars often interpret these images as symbolic, cryptozoologists suggest that they may reflect earlier sightings of cryptid-like creatures. Across cultures, these records show that humans have long noticed beings that straddle the line between the natural and the mysterious. Many modern cryptids also come from folklore and indigenous stories. Bigfoot, also known as Sasquatch, was considered a forest guardian in Native American traditions. Modern sightings surged after the 1958 footprints in California. Loch Ness Monster originated in Celtic water spirit legends, with the first written account in the 6th century. Mothman, reported in West Virginia in the 1960s, often linked to prophetic warnings of disasters. Chupacabra, first reported in Puerto Rico in the 1990s, known for attacks on livestock, and the Jersey Devil, colonial-era folklore from New Jersey's Pine Barrens. Discovered. Some modern paranormal theories suggest that cryptids might not just be undiscovered animals. They may be interdimensional beings, crossing between worlds, appearing and disappearing unpredictably. Psychic or thought form entities, manifesting from collective fears or energy in certain locations. The connection to UFOs or extraterrestrial activity. whereas some cryptid sightings overlap strange lights, electromagnetic disturbances, or disappearances, hinting at links to alien intelligence or portals. You have energy sensitive or spiritual entities. They're similar to astral parasites and ghost phenomena, but some cryptids may feed on emotions, fear, or psychic energy, especially in isolated or high-stress environments. You have shape-shifting cryptids appearing across many cultures. You have the skinwalkers, who are said to be humans who gain supernatural powers to transform into animals or other beings, often for malevolent purposes. Trolls, Scandinavian, and fox spirits from Japan can change form. In African and Caribbean traditions, you have witches and sorcerers who may assume animal forms for protection or for revenge. You have werewolves in Europe, who are humans transforming into wolves linked to curses, lunar cycles, or moral transgression, often seen as warnings about uncontrolled behaviors. The Bible also references unusual, sometimes hybrid and enormous creatures. The behemoth in Job 40:15-24, a massive herbivore with a tail like a cedar. You have the Leviathan, Job 41, Psalms, a formidable sea serpent or dragon-like creature. And then you have the Nephilim, Genesis 6:1-4, giants, offspring of sons of God and humans. Many cryptids share traits with paranormal and energetic entities. They are elusive, powerful, connected to nature, and sometimes linked to human consciousness or psychic energy. In this way, they can be seen as part of a larger unseen world, alongside ghosts and astral parasites, and even cosmic guardians who protect the earth. Just as elementals guard forests, rivers, and fire, and cosmic beings protect the planet from malevolent forces, some cryptids may exist at an intersection of nature, spirit, and interdimensional reality. Whether seen as unknown animals, spiritual entities, or mythic archetypes, cryptids highlight humanity's fascination with the unknown. History reminds us that some creatures once thought impossible were later proven real, showing that mystery and discovery often go hand in hand, and that the world may be far stranger than we can imagine. In modern times, these narratives echo environmental science emphasis on interconnected systems. So beyond ghosts, many traditions describe non-human beings whose role is to protect Earth and maintain balance. Among these are elementals, supernatural spirits tied to the four classical elements: earth, air, fire, and water. Unlike ghosts, they are not spirits of the dead, but primal forces that can be protective or mischievous, sometimes even destructive if their domains are disturbed. Elementals are often seen as guardians, watching over forests, rivers, mountains, and skies. They can be protective and benevolent, maintaining balance in their domains. Some stories describe them appearing in abandoned buildings, or manifesting strange phenomena when humans disrupt the natural order. Ancient accounts even suggest that some of these beings were incredibly powerful, capable of influencing or controlling their respective element. Originating in the 16th century paracelestian lore, elementals are classified as gnomes, who protect the earth. They are guardians of soil, caves, and mountains. Sprites, who protect lakes, rivers, and oceans, so they're tied to water. You have the sylphs, who are tied to air. They are spirits of wind and sky. And then you have salamanders, tied to fire, connected to flames, hearths, and volcanic energy. Their appearances vary widely, from human-like forms to insect-like or abstract, ethereal shapes. While some folklore suggests they may interact or bargain with humans, elementals are generally solitary, temperamental, and bound to nature rather than human affairs. Unlike ghosts, they have never been human and operate independently of human life. Interactions with elementals and guardians are said to be rare and often subtle. They are quite protective. Unlike spirits attached to humans, they exist independently of human life, but can influence the human environment when their attention is drawn. So, across many traditions, elementals form part of a larger network of unseen guardians, which includes cosmic or ancient tall beings, often described as enormous humanoid spirits or interdimensional entities whose purpose is to protect the earth from harmful energies. In some spiritual frameworks, these beings are part of a larger unseen battle between constructive and destructive forces, helping to maintain balance in both the physical and energetic worlds. Many spiritual and ufology traditions And especially among mediums, contactees, and spiritual channels, ancient tall beings and cosmic protectors are described across cultures, safeguarding the planet and humanity on a larger scale. These entities are frequently referred to as the Nordic aliens, tall whites, or members of a galactic federation of light, sometimes just called the Confederation. According to these perspectives, these cosmic beings exist in an ongoing spiritual and energetic struggle against negative entities, often called reptilians, the archons, or negative grays, to assist in Earth's spiritual evolution and protect humanity. Alright, so you have the Nordics, and I'm going to try to pronounce these correctly. You have the Pleiadians and the Taygedans. Their appearance, they are human-like but enhanced, usually about 6 to 7 feet tall or taller, with fair-skinned, light-haired, blue eyes, and radiating high vibration and loving energy. Their role is often channeled as space brothers or benevolent teachers, guiding humanity toward consciousness, peace, and compassion while protecting Earth from darker influences. You have the tall whites, and their appearance is very tall, pale-skinned, human-like, sometimes described as aloof. Their role is strategic protectors working behind the scenes, countering negative influences and safeguarding Earth's energetic balance. Then you have the Galactic Federation, or the Confederation of Light. They are described as a coalition of highly evolved civilizations, including the Pleiadians, the Arcturians, the Andromedans, and the Sirians. Some are purely energetic beings of light, while others appear tall and humanoid. Considered primary cosmic guardians, ensuring Earth remains on its path toward higher dimension, often described as shifting from 3D to 5D, and defending against malevolent extraterrestrial or etheric entities. The Arcturians, they are often shorter or bald, ordinary accounts about 3 to 4 feet, but higher frequency or ascended masters, Arcturians may appear tall, luminous, or blue-skinned. Their role, they are master healers and galactic protectors, and they specialize in sacred geometry, energy stabilization, and supporting Earth's spiritual ascension. Why do they protect us? According to modern channelings, these cosmic guardians are in conflict with reptilians and draconians, who are malevolent, often shape-shifting or reptilian beings. Then you have your negative grays, typically working with reptilians, known for abduction and genetic experimentation, which is the ones that we usually hear about with UFOs and aliens. And then you have the archons, etheric, parasite-like entities feeding on human fear, chaos, and low vibration energy. How this connects to the elementals and ancient guardians? Elementals protect the natural world and its energy, while cosmic and tall beings operate on a planetary or even galactic scale, maintaining spiritual balance and defending Earth from energetic threats. Across time and cultures, humans have consistently imagined unseen guardians, whether tied to nature, the spiritual plane, or the cosmos, actively working to protect life, preserve harmony, and guide humanity toward higher consciousness. Across history, these stories highlight a recurring theme. Humanity has long imagined unseen forces that protect the natural world, intervene in spiritual battles, and serve as reminders that some aspects of life, energy, nature, and balance exist beyond the human experience. They embody both the power and vulnerability of the natural world and the human need to recognize forces larger than ourselves. In many Native American and indigenous traditions, the spiritual world isn't separate from everyday life. It's part of it. There's a deep belief that everything in nature has a spirit, from the tallest mountain to the smallest stream. Protection and guidance often come from relationships with these spirits rather than control over them. Protective beings take many forms. Some are animal guardians, like the bear, symbolizing strength and leadership, or the wolf, seen as a teacher, guide, and keeper of sacred knowledge. Others are elemental or legendary, like the thunderbird, a powerful protector associated with storms and cleansing energy. The great horned serpent, linked to water, transformation, and life cycles. Water babies, guardians of lakes and rivers, and then again the Bigfoot, or Sasquatch, often viewed as reclusive guardian of the forest. These spirits function as teachers and protectors, not objects of fear. Elementals, too, can be seen as part of this same network of guardians. Just like animal spirits or cryptids, they represent natural forces that maintain balance. They aren't separate from land, they are the land. The rivers, the wind, the fire, watching over it and keeping energy in harmony. You have totems, spirit animals, and spirit guides that play a similar role on a personal level. Totems, often represented by animals or natural symbols connected people to their ancestry, clan, or collective memory. Spirit animals act as personal guides, teaching lessons or embodying qualities like courage, intuition, endurance, or wisdom. And they might appear in dreams, visions, or moments of reflection to offer insight or protection. Spirit guides aren't always animals. They can include ancestors, natural beings, or benevolent forces that help people navigate life and maintain balance with their environment and community. Across tribes, honoring these spiritual allies is expressed through rituals, storytelling, and ceremonies, emphasizing respect and harmony with natural laws. Talismans, amulets, and sacred objects are physical tools that connect people to these protective forces. Made from stone, feathers, bones, shells, or carved wood, they may carry the essence of an animal spirit, ancestor, or elemental. Talismans are often blessed and consecrated in ceremony, intended to protect, attract positive energy, and aid healing or enhance personal strength. Unlike generic charms, they are culturally specific and treated with respect and intention. Some are tied to rites of passage, vision quests, or seasonal ceremonies, linking the physical and the spiritual worlds. In the paranormal and spiritual practice, these objects can serve as high vibrational tools to create boundaries, guide energy, and shield against negative and disruptive forces. Across native and tribal traditions, these practices show a recurring theme. Humans, nature, and spirit are deeply interconnected. Protection, guidance, and learning often come through observation, respect, and relationship rather than domination. Whether it's through animal guardians, cryptids, elementals, or sacred objects, the unseen world is understood as an active, living part of daily life. As we come to the final part of today's episode, we have to talk about one of the most talked about and often most exaggerated parts of the paranormal world, which are dark entities and demons. Throughout history, nearly every culture has had some idea of negative or harmful spiritual forces. In simple terms, when people in ancient times couldn't explain illness or disasters, sudden mood changes, nightmares, or social chaos, they sometimes describe those experiences as the work of unseen dark beings. In the Bible, these entities are described as fallen spiritual forces that oppose God's order. They tempt, deceive, and cause suffering, but they aren't usually described as physical monsters. Instead, they represent rebellion, disorder, and moral struggle. Other ancient civilizations like Mesopotamia, Egypt, Persia, and Greece also believed in harmful spirits. They blamed certain illnesses, bad luck, or strange behavior on unseen forces and used prayer, rituals, or protective charms to guard against them. Over time, these ideas became more structured. During medieval Europe, demonology became closely tied to religion and law. Fear of demons and witchcraft influenced trials, punishments, and social control. King James I of England, in his 1597 book Demonology, wrote extensively about demons and witchcraft. He framed them as part of a cosmic war between God and Satan. His writings reflected the broader mindset of that time. Authority figures saw themselves as defenders of spiritual and social order, and demonology reinforced obedience, hierarchy, and moral discipline. There are also fascinating traditions surrounding King Solomon. So King Solomon, this is a crucial piece that often gets misunderstood. In the Hebrew Bible, King Solomon is known for wisdom granted by God. However, later Jewish, Christian, and Islamic traditions expanded his story. In texts such as the Testament of Solomon, Solomon is said to have received a divine ring or seal that allowed him to command demons. According to these writings, he could question them, learn their names, understand how they afflicted people, and force them to assist in building the temple. The key detail often overlooked in this, Solomon's authority over demons, symbolized wisdom overcoming chaos, not partnership with darkness. The story reflects humanity's desire to understand, categorize, and control unseen forces through divine authority and knowledge. In later centuries, these traditions influenced medieval grimoires and occult literature, though mainstream religious authorities warned against attempting to imitate Solomon's actions. In the New Testament, demons are frequently associated with possession, destructive behavior, illness, trauma, and moral corruption. Jesus' ministry includes exorcisms, emphasizing restoration, healing, and authority over darkness. Early Jewish and Christian communities viewed demons as real spiritual threats, but also emphasized prayer, moral discipline, and divine protection rather than fear. Even there, the emphasis is on restoration and healing, showing that light and authority overcome darkness. Today, modern paranormal researchers approach the topic much more cautiously. Experiences once labeled as demonic are often examined through psychological, neurological, or environmental lenses. Conditions like sleep paralysis, trauma responses, disassociation, and stress can provide vivid, frightening experiences. Responsible investigators now try to distinguish between internal psychological events and possible external phenomena. Many experiences that once terrified people now have scientific explanations. That doesn't mean every mystery is solved, but it does mean fear isn't always the answer. When you step back and you look at the big picture, beliefs about demons and dark entities have often helped societies explain suffering, enforce moral codes, and make sense of the unknown. Sometimes they represented literal spiritual forces. Other times they symbolized human struggles, fear, anger, guilt, temptation, and other parts of ourselves we don't fully understand. And that may be the most important takeaway. When you look at everything that I have shared with you in this episode, ghosts, cryptids, elementals, spirit guardians, talismans, and dark entities, you see a pattern. Humans have always tried to interpret the unseen, sometimes through religion, folklore, science, spiritual, psychological, and cultural. Education replaces fear with understanding. Curiosity replaces panic, and balance replaces chaos. They reflect something very real about the human experience, our struggle with chaos, suffering, and the unknown. Whether you view these beings as literal, symbolic, psychological, or cultural, the real power comes from knowledge. The unknown becomes less threatening when we approach it thoughtfully instead of reactively. At the end of the day, the paranormal isn't just about what might be out there, it's also about what's inside us, our fears, our beliefs, our need for meaning. And maybe the real protection isn't in rituals or charms or ancient seals. Maybe it's in awareness, critical thinking, respect for history, and staying grounded, even when exploring the mysterious. The paranormal isn't about proving belief. It's about understanding human experience. As I close out this episode, what becomes clear is that the paranormal has never existed in isolation. What humanity has described as spirits, cryptids, demons, or unseen forces are not just scattered ideas across history. They are reflections of a much larger human story. Across civilization and centuries, people have tried to name experiences that felt bigger than logic, deeper than language, or heavier than the visible world. From ancient records to modern encounters, the unseen has consistently served as a mirror, reflecting fear, morality, power, trauma, hope, and the need for meaning. The common thread is not obsession with darkness, but recognition that human perception and consciousness are complex. We are wired to interpret, to protect ourselves, to seek patterns, and to understand what feels beyond immediate explanation. What unites traditions across cultures is not agreement on what the unseen is, but agreement that discernment matters. Experiences that bring clarity, restoration, growth, and accountability are treated very differently than experiences that bring confusion, fear, chaos, or loss of agency. These distinctions were never just about labeling spirits as good or evil. They were about teaching boundaries, ethics, responsibility, and awareness, both psychologically and spiritually. Stories of demons, curses, and dark entities often functioned as cautionary narratives. They warned against the abuse of power, unchecked ego, unresolved emotion, and collective fear. They reminded communities that imbalance, whether personal or societal, has consequences. When we examine these accounts carefully, many of them reveal more about human behavior and emotional wounds than about invading external forces. Equally important is the role of healing in paranormal experience. Not every encounter is external. Many experiences attributed to the unseen are intertwined with unresolved trauma, suppressed emotion, belief systems, or heightened states of stress. Across disciplines, psychological, neurological, spiritual, clarity comes through grounding, self-awareness, emotional regulation, and strengthened boundaries. Growth does not come from surrendering to fear, it comes from understanding it. Enlightenment, in this sense, is not escape from reality. It is a deeper presence within it. It is knowing your own mind, honoring your nervous system, maintaining agency, and approaching the unknown without losing stability or discernment. So, whether someone approaches the paranormal through history, psychology, spirituality, folklore, or lived experience, the invitation remains consistent. Stay curious and stay grounded. Stay discerning. Not everything unexplained is hostile. Not everything intense is sacred. And not everything unfamiliar requires fear or is always a demon. The unknown has always stood at the edge of human awareness. We ask questions, we tell stories, we try to make sense of what we feel. And perhaps that is the most meaningful part. Not proving the paranormal is, but understanding what it reveals about us. The goal is not blind belief, and it is not dismissal. It is a thoughtful exploration. The paranormal exists at the intersection of culture, biology, perception, and mystery. Whether these phenomena are external, internal, or a bridge between the two, one truth remains. Humanity has always encountered the unexplained, and how we respond to it says more about our consciousness, our healing, and our growth than the mystery itself. I'm Jennifer, and this has been Universal Truths, Exploring the Extraordinary. Please go to my website, universalworksofhealing.org, and submit your stories, your questions, or your curiosities, because your experience may shape a future episode or help others to understand that they are not alone in what they are feeling or experiencing. Be sure to pick up a copy of my book, Enlightenment, Helping You Be Your Own Cure Through Open-Hearted Communication and Insight, available now on Amazon.com. Thank you for listening, and until next time, stay curious, stay grounded, and never stop exploring the extraordinary.